It began with the sound of an engine that didn't belong. A sleek black Bentley glided through Manhattan's financial district. Polished, quiet, powerful. Most turned their heads in admiration. But a few, those who worked at Dominion Bank, turned their heads in confusion. Behind the wheel was Thomas Caldwell, vice president at Dominion. Not a billionaire, not even close. So why was a man like him driving a car reserved for the ultra-wealthy? Why did a mid-level banker live like a Fortune 500 CEO? That question would unravel everything. Thomas Caldwell wasn't just another corporate suit. He was sharp, charismatic, Yale-educated, the kind of guy who could sell an ice cube in a blizzard twice. At just 38, he was one of the youngest VPs Dominion Bank had ever seen. Smart enough to earn respect, slick enough to dodge suspicion. But Caldwell didn't want respect. He wanted envy, and he wanted it fast. First came the Rolex, then the luxury apartment, then the yacht parties, Dubai weekends, custom-tailored Tom Ford suits. Caldwell's lifestyle outpaced his paycheck by millions. Colleagues gossiped, but no one questioned it directly. In banking, success speaks louder than reason. But quietly, some began to wonder, how does someone earning six figures live like a billionaire? What were they not seeing? Behind the image was a truth even Caldwell couldn't admit. He didn't grow up with wealth. He grew up wishing he had. No trust fund, no legacy, just ambition. And ambition, when fed by insecurity, becomes dangerous. To Caldwell, money wasn't just power. It was proof. Proof that he belonged among the elite. Proof that he had won. And when his salary couldn't match his standards, he found another way. This wasn't about luxury. It was about identity. Every private jet, every penthouse party, every stolen dollar wasn't just for show. It was armor, a mask, and soon someone would see behind it. This wasn't just a man living above his means. This was the beginning of a $300 million lie. Every banker chases the bonus. It's the unspoken reward of Wall Street, the carrot at the end of the high-stakes race. But for Thomas Caldwell, the bonus wasn't enough. Not when the lifestyle he craved cost millions. Not when he had tasted luxury and couldn't let it go. It started subtly. A small wire transfer to a dormant account. $15,000. Then $40,000 the following week. Unnoticed, undetected. Caldwell knew the system. He'd spent years building it, auditing it, exploiting its gaps. He found a loophole in Dominion's internal fund routing, a flaw buried under layers of compliance. He didn't steal from clients, not yet. He rerouted internal slush funds. No one tracked closely. At first, it felt harmless, easy, quiet, clean. But greed always escalates. Caldwell registered 3 shell companies, all with names that sounded legit: Stonebridge Holdings, Easter Equities, Mason Ridge Capital. They had no offices, no employees, no real business, just bank accounts. From those accounts, the money was moved offshore to the Cayman Islands, then to Luxembourg, then to a private vault in Zurich. In under 6 months, over $6 million had quietly vanished from Dominion's books, and no one had a clue. Caldwell didn't hold back. He upgraded from a high-rise to a penthouse with a private rooftop pool, hosted parties with caviar and champagne fountains, flew models to Tulum on a whim. He wore $80,000 Patek Philippe's and tipped doormen with hundreds. On Instagram, he became a Wall Street icon. In reality, he was robbing the system blind. Colleagues were baffled. His salary hadn't changed. His title was the same. So where was the money coming from? Caldwell crossed a line and never looked back. What started as borrowing became a lifestyle, and the lifestyle became a prison. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd repay it, that everyone bent the rules. But deep down, he knew he wasn't borrowing. He was stealing. Stealing because he needed to be admired, because anything less felt like failure. His identity was no longer banker. It was con man with a corner office. Not everyone was fooled. Jessica Morris, a junior analyst with a knack for detail, noticed discrepancies. fund movements with no associated projects, wire transfers that didn't align. She flagged them quietly, filed a report anonymously. No one knew it yet, but Thomas Caldwell's empire of lies had just been put under a microscope. At first, it was about proving himself. Now, it was about surviving the lie. Thomas Caldwell wasn't just funding a lifestyle. He was feeding an addiction. The penthouse, the jet, the watch, each item a hit of dopamine. But luxury doesn't just cost money. It demands more. And Caldwell was running out of ways to keep the illusion alive. By year 2, the fraud ballooned. Private chefs, a villa in Capri, a $1.2 million McLaren, leased under one of his shell companies. Monthly spending crossed $300,000. Caldwell wasn't just enjoying money. He was burning it. And to keep up, he had to steal more and faster. He expanded his operation, manipulating internal ledgers, forging approvals, and creating fake vendors. The more he stole, the more he had to steal, just to maintain appearances. He wasn't rich. He was drowning in designer debt. Psychologists call it status inflation. The more you consume, the more you need to feel the same high. For Caldwell, luxury was no longer exciting. It was necessary. The thrill of the first Rolex had faded. Now he needed a new penthouse just to feel alive, a bigger yacht to feel important, another zero to feel like he mattered. And the more he built, the more fragile his empire became, because none of it was real. Not the lifestyle, not the money, not the man he pretended to be. All empires fall the same way, quietly, then all at once. Caldwell missed a detail. A single wire transfer, sent on a Sunday, slipped into the wrong audit file. It triggered a system flag, a minor anomaly in a sea of transactions. But it landed on the desk of someone who paid attention. A forensic accountant, quiet, methodical, deadly with numbers. And with that mistake, Caldwell's clock began ticking. Behind the suits and the smile, Caldwell was unraveling. He stopped sleeping, grew paranoid, started drinking more. He installed cameras in his apartment, fired his personal assistant without cause, changed phones weekly. The mask was cracking, and for the first time, he realized he wasn't living in luxury. He was trapped in it. The cars, the watches, the women, none of it made him feel safer, just more exposed. The investigation was quiet, internal, discreet, dangerous. Caldwell had no idea. Not yet, but the numbers were closing in. The trail was unraveling. One wire, one fake invoice, one name, Thomas Caldwell, at the center of it all. In banking, numbers don't lie, but people do. For over 2 years, Thomas Caldwell manipulated the system, rewriting the truth with every transfer, until one number, just one, refused to stay buried. It started with an end-of-quarter compliance review. Routine, boring, just another checkbox. But for senior auditor Elaine Monroe, something felt wrong. A vendor name she'd never seen before. A payment time-stamped on a Sunday. And the signature? Forged. She didn't sound the alarm. She dug deeper, quietly. What she found would shake Dominion Bank to its core. Elaine brought in a second set of eyes, a forensic accounting firm known for cracking corporate fraud. They traced dozens of shell entities tied to one email address, th.caldwell@dominion.com. Offshore transfers, falsified invoices, internal fund rerouting disguised as innovation budgets. Caldwell had built a maze of lies, but now the right people were following the thread. Every dollar, every timestamp, every whisper of deceit was cataloged, connected, and confirmed. Dominion's board was briefed behind closed doors. Legal teams went in a lockdown. HR froze Caldwell's access quietly. IT began archiving every email, every login, every file. But publicly, nothing changed. Caldwell still walked the halls in $1,000 suits, still smiled in meetings, still thought he was untouchable. The silence wasn't protection. It was preparation. April 16th, 10:42 a.m. Caldwell arrived at Dominion's headquarters like any other day. By 11:15, he was in conference room 4B. Door closed. No phone. For people across the table. Thomas, one of them, said, "We need to talk about these accounts." The color drained from his face. He didn't speak. For the first time in years, Caldwell had nothing to say. By the end of the day, Caldwell's access was revoked. By the end of the week, the story leaked to the press. Headlines lit up. Wall Street VP accused in $300 million fraud. Dominion Bank under federal scrutiny. Luxury liar. The rise and fall of Thomas Caldwell. Investors panicked. Stock plummeted. Careers shattered. And one man, once envied, now infamous, watched the empire he built burn. As the investigation widens, Caldwell's secrets come pouring out, and so do the names of those who helped him. This wasn't a one-man job. It was a network built on silence. Every empire built on lies eventually crumbles, but it rarely collapses alone. When Thomas Caldwell's scam came crashing down, it didn't just ruin his name. It took down everyone who stood too close. After the audit report surfaced, Dominion Bank erupted behind the scenes. Overnight, an internal investigation exploded into a federal probe. Regulators swarmed the firm. Laptops were seized. Communications frozen. Executives lawyered up. Caldwell was the first domino. But he wasn't the only one with blood on his hands. Emails exposed conversations. Slack messages hinted at warnings ignored. Multiple directors had approved fake vendor contracts without ever asking questions. Caldwell didn't pull off a $300 million theft alone. He had help. A senior project manager who rubber-stamped invoices. An IT analyst who quietly deleted audit logs. A junior VP who got a consulting bonus every quarter for staying silent. None of them ever touched the money directly. But they knew, and they looked away. Some were bribed. Others were afraid. A few were just greedy. When questioned, their responses were chilling. "I thought it was above my pay grade. He told me it was a special project. I didn't ask." Caldwell's family vanished from public view. His wife filed for divorce days after the indictment. Luxury cars were repossessed. The penthouse emptied. He was left with nothing but a legal team and a mirror. And what stared back at him wasn't a genius banker. It was a man who traded his soul for status. The federal case grew fast. Over 600 documents, 14 shell companies, 3 international wire trails. Swiss authorities froze $82 million. Cayman accounts were shut down, and a trail led to an encrypted server used to hide offshore statements. It wasn't just fraud. It was financial engineering weaponized. And Caldwell? He watched his empire bleed out through spreadsheets and subpoenas. The media turned Caldwell into a symbol of unchecked greed. The banker who faked fortune. Bentleys and lies. Wall Street's $300 million mirage. Protesters gathered outside Dominion HQ. Former employees spoke out. Whistleblowers came forward. And suddenly, the entire financial sector was asking one question. How many other Caldwells are out there? Inside the courtroom, the world watches as a once-respected banker faces justice and tries to rewrite the narrative one last time. But the evidence won't lie for him. April 6th, 10 a.m. The courtroom is packed. Journalists fill the benches. Former colleagues watch from the shadows. And at the center, Thomas Caldwell, no longer in a tailored suit, no longer in control. Now, just a man in a gray blazer, accused of orchestrating the biggest banking fraud since 2008. The prosecution opened with precision. 147 transactions, 14 offshore accounts, $298.6 million, misappropriated, rerouted, and concealed. They showed wire records, internal emails, phone logs, surveillance footage. They didn't need to prove greed. They only had to prove intent. And Caldwell's digital fingerprints were everywhere. Caldwell's legal team painted a different picture. Stress, burnout, miscommunication. They claimed the transfers were temporary reallocations, that he had full intention to repay them, that Dominion's internal controls were broken, and Caldwell simply played the system. They leaned on doubt, not denial. And Caldwell? He sat still, expressionless, a man caught between reality and reinvention. One by one, the witnesses came forward. A former assistant, who said Caldwell paid her rent, for silence. An internal auditor, who admitted being intimidated into burying reports. A former friend, who broke down on the stand, revealing Caldwell once said, "It's not theft if no one notices." But people noticed. Clients lost millions. Employees lost pensions. Shareholders lost faith. Caldwell didn't just steal money. He stole trust. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. Twitter lit up. Headlines blared. Trial of the decade. Wall Street's house of cards. From Bentley to bars. Memes flooded the internet. But inside the court, the mood was cold, clinical, and final. This wasn't about drama anymore. It was about accountability. In closing, the prosecution said, "This man stole nearly $300 million. Not with a gun, but with a signature, and he thought no one would notice." The defense replied, "Thomas Caldwell is not a monster. He's a flawed man, and his punishment should reflect that." The room fell silent. The jury left, and the nation waited. The verdict was coming, but no matter the outcome, Caldwell's world had already collapsed. The trial wasn't just about guilt. It was about the cost of ambition and the true price of pretending to be someone you're not. After weeks of testimony, the jury delivers its decision. Will Caldwell walk away or be locked away for life? The world is watching, and justice is calling. It took the jury 3 days, 36 hours of deliberation, hundreds of pages of evidence, and one life-altering decision. For Thomas Caldwell, time stood still. The courtroom was silent. The judge returned. The jury filed in, expressionless. Has the jury reached a verdict? A pause. A paper passed forward. And then, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, embezzlement. The room didn't erupt. It exhaled. Caldwell didn't flinch. No tears, no rage, no denial, just a slow nod, as if he already knew, as if for the first time, he accepted what he had become. Behind him, his lawyers looked defeated. In front of him, the judge read the sentencing date. Sentencing scheduled for June 14th. Defendant to remain in federal custody. A U.S. Marshal approached. The cuffs clicked shut. Caldwell's walk out of the courtroom was silent, but it echoed across the country. The headlines exploded. Caldwell convicted in historic $300 million fraud trial. Justice served on Wall Street. Investors celebrated. Victims felt vindicated. Dominion Bank's stock began to crawl back barely. But the public? They weren't satisfied. They asked, how'd he get away with it for so long? Who else knew? And how many more Caldwells are still out there? Thomas Caldwell's case became a case study. Business schools dissected it. Law firms warned about it. Regulators rewrote internal compliance protocols across Wall Street. But no policy could undo the damage. $300 million was gone. Trust shattered. Careers ruined. And for Caldwell, the verdict was just the beginning. In an interview before sentencing, a journalist asked Caldwell one question. Was it worth it? He looked at the camera, paused, and said, "For a while, it felt like I was king of the world. But kings fall too." And with that, the man who once ruled from penthouse returned to his prison cell. Let's explore the ripple effects on Dominion Bank, the economy, and the colleagues who turn a blind eye. Because when one man's greed infects a system, the collapse is never contained. The trial was over. The verdict delivered. But the damage was just beginning. Because when $300 million disappears under the nose of a trusted institution, the collapse doesn't stop with the criminal. It spreads. Dominion Bank, once ranked among the top 5 regional investment firms in the U.S., was now a symbol of recklessness. Their CEO resigned 2 weeks after the verdict. The board was restructured. 4 department heads were terminated without severance. The SEC launched parallel investigations. Clients withdrew over $2.3 billion in assets. By Q3, Dominion stock had dropped 64%. The bank didn't just lose money. It lost credibility. Caldwell's former team faced their own quiet trials. Some lost jobs. Others were blacklisted from the industry. One junior analyst, just 26, was hospitalized for stress-related heart complications after being questioned by federal investigators for weeks. These weren't co-conspirators. They were collateral damage. Good people caught in a system that rewarded silence more than scrutiny. Pensioners, teachers' unions, veterans' trusts. These were the people whose money funded Caldwell's jets, watches, and secret accounts. Class action lawsuits followed swiftly. Dominion paid out $180 million in settlements, most of it covered by emergency insurance. The rest? Absorbed in fire sale asset liquidations. For the clients, it wasn't just about money. It was betrayal, and betrayal cuts deep. But the real story wasn't just Caldwell. It was the culture that allowed him to thrive. Promotions over questions. Profit over ethics. Loyalty over accountability. Dominion wasn't unique. It was just the one that got caught. And as regulators scrambled to patch loopholes, Wall Street insiders whispered the uncomfortable truth. There are more Caldwells out there. We just haven't seen them fall yet. Years from now, Thomas Caldwell will be a name in case studies, a cautionary tale in corporate trainings, a warning whispered in risk management meetings. But for those who lived through it, the impact was real, the scars permanent. His downfall was spectacular, but the fallout is far more haunting. We conclude this story with a look at Caldwell's life in prison, the psychological unraveling, and a lasting message he left behind. Because sometimes the steepest price of greed is the soul you lose along the way. The luxury is gone. The suits replaced with gray uniforms. The penthouse views swapped for a 6x9 concrete box. And Thomas Caldwell, once the man who moved markets, is now just inmate number 44216 at Otisville Federal Correctional Institution. Caldwell serves 32 years without parole. White-collar unit, minimal security, but the walls? Still unforgiving. His days start at 5 a.m. No boardrooms, just breakfast lines. He scrubs floors, teaches finance literacy to other inmates. Irony? He teaches how to avoid the mistakes he made. And each night, alone in his bunk, he stares at the ceiling and replays the same question. Was the Bentley worth it? But the real twist didn't come in court. It came 3 years later, in a letter sent anonymously to a financial journalist. It had no return address, just 5 pages typed, and at the bottom signed, TC. Inside, Caldwell made a jaw-dropping claim. He hadn't acted alone. He named 3 other high-level executives at Dominion, people who greenlit transactions, who received kickbacks, who, in his words, fed the beast alongside me. The letter ended with this: I took the fall, but I didn't build the machine alone. I was just the first cog that cracked. The letter sparked a new investigation. 2 former executives were indicted within months. One fled the country. Another took their own life before arrest. The story exploded again. Front pages, breaking news, congressional hearings. Caldwell, from his cell, had pulled the trigger on a second scandal. And in doing so, he etched his name deeper into financial infamy. Before his final parole hearing, Caldwell gave one last interview. No cameras, just a microphone and a single question. What would you tell your 30-year-old self? His answer? You don't lose your soul all at once. You sell it off piece by piece. First for a bonus, then a car, then a title, until one day, you look in the mirror and there's nothing left. Silence followed, the kind of silence that doesn't need commentary. Thomas Caldwell's story ends in a cell, not with a bang, but with a whisper, a reminder that greed never arrives screaming. It walks in, dressed in success. He didn't rob a bank with a gun. He was the bank, and that was the danger. This was the story of a man who wanted everything, and lost even more. A cautionary tale, a financial thriller, a truth we dare not ignore. This was Money Traps. If this story shook you, if you felt the fall, the fraud, and the fallout, then don't just watch in silence. Tap the like button if you believe stories like this need to be told. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think really built the machine? Was Caldwell a mastermind or a pawn? Share this video with someone who still thinks white-collar crime has no victims. And if you never want to miss the next scandal, the next scheme, the next money trap, hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell, and join the movement exposing greed one story at a time. Because the next fall from grace could be happening right now.